Welcome to the deep dive. So if you, our listener, wanted like a single snapshot of just how turbulent late 2025 feels on the world stage, well, the sources you gave us certainly deliver. We've got documents here describing a global system that seems caught, between these really big geopolitical moves and almost aggressive self-sabotage in some places.
Yeah, this deep dive, it really feels like a high-speed map of global change. We're trying to navigate these huge geopolitical shifts, some fundamental turbulence in the U.S. economy.
Big-time turbulence.
And this technological disruption that's just blurring lines everywhere between reality and, well, algorithms.
So our mission today is to cut through that noise, pull together the data, and really extract the four most critical threads that seem to be shaping what's coming next. Let's call them geopolitical realignment, the shock of zero migration America.
Definitely a shock.
Radical tech disruption, and this slower erosion of governance. Okay, let's unpack this, maybe starting with that first thread. There's a genuine geopolitical breakthrough here, feels like 2 years in the making, with the Gaza ceasefire.
That's right. So sources really detailed the first phase of Donald Trump's plan. It's a highly ambitious, this 20-point plan to end the conflict in Gaza. And this deal, announced after talks in Egypt, it's pretty comprehensive in what it aims for initially.
Yeah, this first phase, it's extensive. We're looking at releasing all remaining Israeli hostages, living and deceased, and in exchange, Israel frees, quote, large numbers of Palestinian prisoners.
Right.
And crucially, Israeli troops have to pull back to this temporary boundary. They're calling it the Yellow Line. And then a massive surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza.
But what's really central here is that this deal, it's only the starting gun. I mean, the ultimate goal of the Trump plan is lasting peace. Yeah. And that really relies heavily on disarming Hamas and then installing some kind of technocratic government in Gaza, which would be overseen by this personally chosen board of peace from Trump.
Right, but the hurdles after phase one seem, well, predictably huge. The whole fate of Hamas's military capability. That's the immediate sticking point, isn't it?
Absolutely. Does Hamas just postpone disarmament? Or if they do disarm, do rival clans just step into that vacuum? It's not clear.
And then beyond security, the sheer economic challenge is staggering. The World Bank is estimating reconstruction costs alone $53 billion.
Exactly. $53 billion. And, the sources point to something maybe even more fundamental than money or weapons.
Which is?
Just lost faith. After years of just brutal conflict, ordinary Israelis, ordinary Palestinians, they've largely lost confidence that peace is even possible anymore.
That's a heavy backdrop. So if the Middle East shows this monumental challenge of rebuilding trust and, well, literally rebuilding places, moving east shows something else. The rise of these hardline leaders promising strong national rejuvenation.
Yeah, let's turn to Japan. The political landscape there has definitely entered a new phase.
Historic change, right?
Absolutely historic. Takaichi Sanai has been elected leader of the ruling LDP. She's poised to become Japan's first female prime minister. And the markets reacted instantly. Japanese stocks just soared when she won, suggesting investors are really expecting aggressive, pro-growth action.
The media is calling this her heavy metal phase. Is that actually warranted, or is it just media hype for what's basically a standard conservative shift?
Well, it seems kind of warranted. She's often described as Japan's Margaret Thatcher, a real hardliner on immigration.
Okay.
And she's expected to bring back a much more, let's say, muscular version of Shinzo Abe's old economic policies.
Abenomics, but tougher.
Kind of. And maybe more striking, she's expected to take a tougher, more nationalistic line with the U.S. on trade, even while still relying on America for security. That definitely signals a shift, prioritizing Japan's economic interests, maybe over alliance comfort.
And you see that same instinct redefining national boundaries and interests elsewhere, too. In the UK, there's the historic news, Dame Sarah Mullally becoming the first woman Archbishop of Canterbury in March 2026.
Which is huge news. The 106th person in that role.
But that's balanced by some pretty sharp political moves.
Right. On the political front over there, the opposition Conservative Party has now officially made withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, official policy.
Wow.
And their leader, Kemi Badenoch, she's also pledged to abolish stamp duty, the tax on buying houses if they win the next election.
So the connecting thread here, what is it?
It feels like a clear pattern. Major powers are recalibrating, often by asserting stricter national sovereignty, tighter internal boundaries. You see it in the Gaza plan, the tough new leader in Japan, the UK conservatives pulling away from international treaties.
Right.
And it even applies down to, smaller strategic moves, like Australia strengthening its military ties with Papua New Guinea. That's clearly about pushing back against China's influence in the South Pacific. The old global order is being, well, aggressively redrawn.
That takes us perfectly to the U.S., our second major thread. Because policy there is redrawing the economic foundation, maybe just as aggressively. We have to talk about what the sources are calling zero migration America.
Yeah, this is a dramatic, potentially historic economic shock. The numbers are just startling. Net migration into the U.S. might actually fall to zero this year, or even turn negative.
Negative? What?
That would be the first recorded time since the Great Depression. Compare that to, like, 2.5 million a year average under the previous administration. It's a massive swing.
And this isn't just about the southern border, right? It extends way up the chain to high-skilled workers. We're seeing this really destructive policy shock brewing. The threat to set the H-1B visa fee at a crippling $100,000.
$100,000. I mean, that fee would just brutalize the research route. Think about university postdoctorates. They simply don't earn enough to justify that kind of outlay for a visa.
So the core insight here from this zero migration America idea,
it feels like the U.S. is systematically trading short-term political wins for what amounts to a long-term structural dismantling of its own innovation engine. That's the real danger.
and the long-term cost, it's huge and often just ignored, isn't it? Skilled migrants, they're only like 5% of the labor force, but they generate 10% of the earnings.
Yeah, and between 1990 and 2010, they were responsible for something like 30 to 50% of all U.S. productivity gains. All of them.
So by slamming the door this hard, America is basically telling the world's best and brightest, you're not welcome, and that just severely kneecaps U.S. innovation down the line.
And that economic isolation? It doesn't stop with migration. It continues with tariffs. Now, the average tariff rates are actually a bit lower than some people feared, around 11% in August, not the 28% predicted earlier.
Okay, so not as bad as expected overall.
Overall, maybe. But they are taking a very specific and devastating toll on U.S. agriculture.
Right, the China embargo on U.S. soybeans, that sounds critical.
It is. By mid-September this year, 0 orders placed. 0. Compared to 6.5 million tons this time last year. It's a massive crisis.
Yeah.
Specifically for American farmers.
And here's the paradox then. The tariffs, they aren't causing like an immediate total economic collapse, but they are directly boosting consumer prices.
Exactly. The sources suggest tariffs are adding about 0.3 percentage points to inflation right now.
Okay.
And that's expected to peak near 3.5% underlying inflation, probably around the turn of the year. So consumers feel it.
The U.S. economy isn't tanking, and that seems to be thanks to this massive, maybe unstable counterpoint, the just astonishing stock market boom.
Yeah, fueled by this almost manic optimism about AI technology. The S&P 500 is up, what, 40% since its low point back in April?
Incredible, and that boom is basically propping up overall growth and consumption through the wealth effect, right? People feel richer, so they spend more.
Precisely. But that market confidence, it stands in really stark contrast to the political dysfunction we're seeing.
Exactly. Which brings us to the political weaponization of domestic crises. The government shutdown, it's now in its second week, no compromise in sight, and the White House is actually suggesting furloughed federal employees might not get paid.
And we're seeing the OMB director, Russell Vought, actively using the shutdown as leverage. It's quite deliberate.
How so?
Well, we see specific threats to freeze funds already appropriated by Congress, at least $28 billion frozen so far. And it seems targeted, hitting Democratic states and big projects like $18 billion meant for New York Transit. Plus, he's demanding federal departments submit detailed plans on how they would actually implement mass layoffs of federal workers. This isn't just managing a shutdown. It's leveraging essential government functions for political gain.
And then there's this extraordinary situation in Chicago, the Chicago standoff. The administration sent in National Guard troops, 300 from Illinois, 200 from Texas, to support federal immigration agents.
Which Democrats immediately called an invasion.
Right. Prompting a lawsuit from Illinois and Chicago against the president's order and the president's response, threatening to use the Insurrection Act to just override the courts.
It's just an unprecedented level of internal political conflict using essentially military force domestically.
That confrontation, it leads us right into our third thread, technology and its rapid disruption, which ironically is fueling that unstable stock market boom we just talked about.
Yeah, the sources flag a pretty serious warning from the Bank of England. They're worried about the risk of a sharp market correction, specifically in the tech sector.
And why is that?
It centers on concentration risk. The top 5 companies in the S&P 500 now account for nearly 30% of its entire market value. Almost a third.
Just 5 companies.
Just 5. So if those predicted enormous future profits from AI, if they don't actually materialize, if the hype turns out to be greater than the reality, that stock market bubble could burst, and the economic consequences could be massive, cascading.
And while those huge companies are maybe worrying about future profits, many businesses are dealing with a very present danger, this cybercrime wave. The source material is just full of examples showing how devastating ransomware has become.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about Jaguar Land Rover, JLR. Took them over a month to recover from an attack, costing an estimated $50 million a week.
$50 million a week?
Yeah. It forced the UK government to underwrite a $1.5 billion loan just to keep their suppliers afloat. Or Asahi Brewery, 30 factories halted. Ransomware is driving this surge. It accounts for 44% of all data breaches now. That's up from only 10% back in 2021.
And what really stands out is this huge defense gap, especially for smaller companies. Only 1 in 10 small to medium businesses apparently have cyber insurance, compared to 6 in 10 large firms.
Yeah, they're just uniquely exposed. They could be completely crippled by one of these attacks.
So moving from critical infrastructure risk to maybe cultural disruption, we see the bizarre side of AI emerging too, these new AI content models like Sora 2 for video generation, leading to what some tech people are calling digital slop.
Yeah, digital slop. Low effort, low quality, AI-generated stuff flooding the internet.
And the economics behind it are just weird. It's estimated that each video generated by Sora costs OpenAI about $1 in computing power.
Right, $1 per video. Yet the app itself is currently free for users, so it generates this slop-fueled uplift, just tons of this content hitting the web.
But the absolute strangest cultural result has got to be these viral, X-rated, AI-generated country songs, like that infamous one, Country Girls Make Do, racking up millions of streams.
Wait, seriously, X-rated AI country?
Apparently. So this technology that could redefine medicine or warfare is being used right now to pump out these songs that completely defy any traditional industry rules or taste. That's the ultimate definition of technological chaos, maybe.
It really is. It's like a revolution where consumers, or maybe they're just algorithms themselves, generate cultural products that the old gatekeepers, labels, studios, censors would never, ever approve. The algorithm is a new gatekeeper now, and it only cares about what goes viral.
Okay, our final thread takes us to the erosion of governance and humanism. We're looking at 2 very different forms of political decay around the world. Let's start with African autocracy. The sources suggest this isn't just an old Cold War relic anymore. It's becoming a new, entrenched template for holding power.
That seems right, because 7 of the world's 10 longest-serving leaders, non-monarchs, that is, are now in Africa.
Yeah.
Figures like Teodoro Obiang in Equatorial Guinea, power for over 46 years, or Paul Biya in Cameroon, he's 92 years old. And the research confirms, once these strong men breach constitutional term limits, governance just systematically deteriorates. Patronage networks shrink to a tiny inner circle, corruption goes way up, and economic outcomes get worse for most people.
And the troubling part is this template isn't dying out. The old generation of strongmen is actually being replaced by younger, autocratic leaders.
Exactly. And it's a trend helped, the sources note, by the current U.S. administration, just showing a clear lack of interest in actively promoting democracy in Africa. So the system of personalized rule just continues.
Meanwhile, in Russia, we see a different kind of decay, an ideological show trial that demonstrates the state's power over, well, objective reality itself. This case involves a theater director, Yevgenia Berkovich.
Right, she's charged with justification and promotion of terrorism for her play, Finest, the Bright Falcon.
And the absurdity of the prosecution case here really needs a closer look. They relied on testimony from an expert who used something called destructology. What on earth is that?
Destructology, yeah. It's basically a pseudoscience, seemingly invented to diagnose cultural threats, things like feminism, LGBT rights, even just basic humanism, as existential dangers to Russian identity and the state.
So junk science.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the judge in the case even refused to read Berkovich's play itself. Relied entirely on this manufactured ideological framework.
It raises that really important question, why target her? Her work wasn't overtly political in the usual sense.
Exactly. It seems she was dangerous not because she was an ideological opponent, like a dissident, but because her work implicitly denied the supremacy of ideology itself. The state seems to be prosecuting her for just embodying humanism, compassion, simple normality in a state that demands total ideological conformity.
She said something powerful about that, didn't she?
She did. In her own words, she stated she felt the prosecution judged her compassion and mercy to be, quote, propaganda or justification of terrorism.
Wow.
When violence and ideological purity become the norm, just displaying normal human empathy becomes in itself a criminal act.
That is a really stark final observation on the state of global governance right now.
Yeah, if we step back for just a second, the connecting thread through all these disparate sources, it feels like this simultaneous presence of, like, hyper-ambition on one hand and aggressive isolation on the other. You've got huge geopolitical maneuvering in the Middle East, deliberate economic isolation in the U.S. with a zero migration policy, a frantic race towards tech frontiers driven by AI and shadowed by massive cyber risk.
Right.
And all of that is happening alongside this slow, corrosive decay of good governance, particularly in these personalized autocratic regimes.
The aha moments just keep coming, don't they? A potential breakthrough peace deal in Gaza, maybe? The sudden hardline rise of Takaichi in Japan demanding national sovereignty. The shocking collapse of U.S. net migration that really threatens long-term innovation.
The colossal financial danger ransomware poses to major businesses.
Yeah, and the brave, almost defiant stand of Yevgeny Berkovich against the tyranny of pseudoscience in Russia. So what does this all mean? I mean, the sources seem to show power being fundamentally redefined across the globe by algorithms generating culture, by tariffs isolating whole economies, and by these personalized, often highly ideological regimes asserting control.
It raises some deep questions.
It does, when so much wealth and, frankly, market stability is getting concentrated in just a handful of tech companies. And political leaders seem to rely more and more on just personal charisma or ideological purity to govern. What does it actually mean anymore to have a stable economy or a free society? We leave that for you to decide.